I fly at high speed through a cloudless sky, far above a stunning undulating landscape. I move with the air currents, effortlessly gliding along with them. The hills and mountains, the shimmering lakes and rivers steer my movements, beckoning to me with possibilities, inspiring and exhilarating me. I can hardly believe my luck that I get to do this, that I get to experience such incredible magic. I slow down and hover near a rushing waterfall, reaching my hand out and marveling at the freezing pull of the water. My imagination carries me forward. No, this isn't a dream. This is how I feel when I'm playing drums. Complete self-directed freedom. I can go anywhere, do anything. I feel and follow the physics of the situation, plugging into my intuition, letting go of fear, and letting the surprises of the music take me places I've never been until now. I'm Dr. Louis Simon, and this is Autotelic, a podcast about attention. A practice like drumming is so captivating and engaging because it involves working on the mind and the body simultaneously. Every time I sit down at the drum set, I approach it as if it's the first time I've ever done this. I test the weight of the sticks as they strike the heads, and I feel the tension of the taut surfaces propelling them upward. I listen to the resulting sounds. I try out some single strokes and then some doubles. I have no expectations. Likewise, as I map out the ideas I want to talk about here and write them down on my computer screen, I feel as if I'm embarking on a tremendous journey. I know I'm going somewhere, but I'm not sure exactly how I'm going to get there. And this adds to my sense of anticipation and excitement. Henry James argued that we should not be so quick to judge what counts as an adventure, noting that, as he said, it's an adventure, an immense one, for me to write this little article. He was referring to his essay, The Art of Fiction, which we still study and discuss 140 years later. I realize now that when I was learning to drum and to control my feet and hands independently, I was learning to subdivide and balance my attention, to mix my experience like an audio engineer mixes the volume levels of different tracks. I learned to create 4 areas of attention in my mind. Part of it would be on the cymbal pattern, another part on the bass drum, another on the snare, and a final on the hi-hat. I was free to choose which part of this mix of awareness I would concentrate on from one moment to the next. This fusion and balancing of aspects of my attention seemed like learning an esoteric skill or carefully building a superpower, one well worth the effort and time I knew it would take to attain. But really, every day all of us do things that are kind of like this. We're confronted with layered attentional choices. We drive our car and listen to a podcast and attend to our child in the back seat while wondering how we're going to get our job done that day and trying to figure out what we're going to do for lunch. And did we remember to pay the water bill? And when is the next payday? And when was the last time I called mom and dad? And we call all of this one thing, driving to work. But like playing the drum set, it's many things at once. And if we feel on top of things, if we feel in control or even in the zone, whether it's driving to work or playing an instrument with a band, it's because we figured out how to balance all of these components in a way that allows us to feel somewhat fine, or at least less anxious. What this tells us is that attentional choices are a real thing, an endless thing. They make up the moments and trajectory of our life. We can adjust our focus, zooming in or zooming out on any number or all of the things we're currently juggling. Chances are, right now, you're probably mixing and balancing and fine-tuning your attention as you listen to this podcast. I bet this is probably not the only thing you're doing right now. We're all making attentional choices all the time, but we do this unconsciously. Becoming conscious of things we do without thinking seems to be one way to really learn and grow, to get more understanding and control of our lives. Before we learn to consciously control our attention, though, we have to pause and consider what attention is and how it works. Spoiler alert, I have found no satisfactory definition of what attention is. It makes sense that everyone has to figure this out for themselves. This undertaking requires introspection and some self-discipline, but greater understanding is available to every one of us. So the first step is to talk about this phenomenon we call our attention. About 14 years ago, around the time when smartphones and social media apps became ubiquitous, I began an attempt to write my first book. I'm actually still working on it all these years later, but I figured I'd compose a few talks about the ideas in it and my challenging writing process, because the manuscript has become quite unwieldy. This is the first talk. It's titled Absorbers and Distractors. I invite you to listen to some ideas I'd like to share about how to become more attentionally aware, how to dive deep into your own journey toward greater focus and purpose, and how our individual and collective attention is being systematically stolen from us. I believe we can regain control of our attention and our minds through awareness and daily practice, and in doing so, can redefine our life in more satisfying, pleasurable, and meaningful ways. Thank you for listening. For much of my professional life, I've been an academic, but I didn't want to write a book for other academics. I wanted to bring up ideas that might be read by a much wider audience. I also wanted to write from a space of some vulnerability and intuitive speculation, perspectives that don't sit well inside the academic stance of depersonalized objectivity, which of course has its place. I also didn't want to write with the assumption that the readers of my book would be familiar with a long history of developments and works within a particular field of study, which is how academic writing operates. Instead, in my book, I would weave together ideas I had learned through decades of studying and teaching literature with what I had discovered over a lifetime of being a drummer and being wildly obsessed with music. Of course, I could also include references to works of literature and philosophy that inform my thinking, and I would invite the reader to explore them on their own. So that was the plan for my book, as I said, still a work in progress. I mentioned smartphones at the outset because my book was about attention and how we use it, and phones were already beginning to take up more and more of that individually finite resource, so rich for exploitation in the burgeoning attention economy. In addition, I found that the vast amounts of fragmented attention devoted to the phone contrasted sharply with the kind of alert absorption I had over the course of my own life found in playing an instrument, in reading, and in listening intently to music. The special qualities of these somehow connected states of mind were the subject of my book. I wondered if it would be possible to transform such an eclectic mix of thoughts and feelings into a coherent work. I was also confounded by the fact that I was trying to write about phenomena that exceed what I think can be expressed in language, namely the subjective qualities of human attention and perception, what an individual experiences as an event and a life. Regarding the phone, it saddened me to see so many people, especially teenagers and younger children, surrender so much time to their devices, exchanging this little inanimate two-dimensional screen for our 360-degree multidimensional physical reality. I continue to believe that this shared physical reality, especially the natural world, is a much bigger and richer place than the phone screen measured in inches. In what we used to call reality, I believe people might discover more benevolent and less manipulative forms of embodied engagement and joy. In the physical world perceived by humans, people might learn how to take control of and focus their attention in ways that benefit them and that promote their own self-directed flourishing. And once experiencing the incomparable, unrepresentable, multi-layered force of real-life experience, they might choose to devote less time to having their attention taken and diminished by insatiable profiteers. At least that's my thinking now. 14 years ago, no one knew where phone life would take us, or that it would come to replace reality for the next generation. I think teachers might be the first to see this, as they're on the front lines of attention, of trying to get students to pay attention. I'm no Luddite when it comes to technology, but what we've seen in the last few years is something I believe has never been seen in all of human history. A technology now exists that conditions the mind of a young person to accept the reality of the screen over and above the reality of the physical and social world. A lot of this has to do with the perception of time, of taking time to single task instead of switch tasking, or what is erroneously called multitasking. Because the human mind cannot focus completely on two very different things at once, it flits between paying attention to multiple things in quick succession. As a result, attention is hollowed out, shallowed, and doesn't stay around long enough to create a significant impression, which is what's supposed to happen when you learn something. So learning is short-circuited, and thinking becomes ever more uninformed and constrained. We would do well to reflect on time. How do we experience its passing? How do we measure it? How do we value our allotted share of it? When we're really absorbed deeply in an experience, we enter into an unusual relationship with time, and we somehow feel more in control of it. Inside what I call absorptive awareness, we live in the moment of the action or sensation. We simply exist, with no need for anything else, no need for anything besides what is happening right now. So we're talking here about finding ways to slow things down, to simplify and distill our attention so that we might find our true self by disappearing into the moment, by making way. Motivated by an urge to become more conscious of how I make my own attentional choices, and wanting to make them in ways that ground me in the world of physical reality, I thought that writing the book would give me an opportunity to reflect on the significance and connotations of the concept of attention itself, and how becoming more conscious of how it functions might enable me to manage it more deliberately. Because I could speak most honestly and thoroughly about these topics from my own experience, the book would need to incorporate some textual representation of me. I would have to pretend that the disparate jumble of what I think of as my experience of being a human could be captured in the symbolic marks of letters and words, as if the I that appears in the written symbols of sentences can vouch for the physiological, psychological, ridiculously complex I that exists in the world, beyond the voice, page, or screen, in my own bodily and cognitive experience. I'm skeptical that the richness of subjective human experience can be captured and communicated easily in words, images, and video. These are all technologies that participate in systems that pretend to capture human experience. But they ignore inner experience because that can't be reached. It can only be had by an individual. I question the idea that personal experience can be somehow exchanged or enumerated. For example, getting people's attention, getting their eyes, makes the world of digital media go round. But getting someone's eyes and time is not the same as getting that person, getting their consciousness, knowing them as a unique individual. We can target and quantify some aspects of individual actions, but the quality of conscious awareness remains elusive. The worlds of images and words create representations of human reality, but they are not human reality. Digital media, all digital media, from compact discs to AI to virtual reality, gives us an imitation of reality, not a substitute for it. But for the first generation raised by cell phones, digital media is indeed the one true reality, and what we've always as humans known as the world means less to them, is in fact a nagging distraction from the world where identity and a sense of self is formed, which is online. Parallels exist between the world of the phone and the representational technology of language. Like the world of the selfie, writing is a human-made mimetic technology. That is, it tries to imitate or mime the experienced human world. In both cases, the world of the phone and the world of language, we wager that we can exchange our lived reality for an imagistic, symbolic representation of it. We expect a human-made technology will somehow be the equivalent of lived reality. But does anyone truly believe that they could create an adequate representation of the fullness and entirety of their uniquely individual being, of their embodied consciousness, in words or images? As I focused on these ideas about experience, representation, and conscious awareness, I moved through long periods of research and note-taking. I reflected on my own experience, both over the course of my life and in those contemporary moments when I devote time to playing drums, reading, or listening to music. In recent years, these pursuits, always prominently among my favorite things to do, have become more precious and dearer to me. I also feel I've come to understand them better and more fully, aided by the ideas of many others who are now beginning to devote their own work to the pressing topic of attention. The isolation brought on by the COVID pandemic gave me more time to dive deeply into my daily practice of drumming. Without external goals involving other musicians or gigs, I focused more intensely on practicing for its own sake, appreciating the time and ability to play as an end in itself, continuously pushing myself to try to conquer new technical challenges. I targeted my weaknesses and worked toward lessening their stultifying impact. In this kind of practice, I found a sense of meaning and non-attachment that needed no external validation. There was no need to record what I was doing, to share selfies of myself doing anything. No need to talk about it. No need for anyone else in the world to know that I did it, when I was doing it, where I was doing it, for how long I did it. The only thing that mattered was actually doing it, not talking or writing or thinking about it, just doing it every day, and with complete concentration and the most thorough focus I could bring to it. I did have an overarching goal, which was simple. I wanted the practice to be honest and satisfying and good. I wanted my playing to feel and sound natural and authentic, the result of the physical properties of the drums, the sticks, the force of my hands and feet, the dimensions and acoustics of my practice room. Inspired by Max Roach's solo song for drum set, The Drum Also Waltzes, my aim was to spontaneously create compelling and captivating music from simple elements, to find the complexity hidden in the apparent simplicity of drumming, and to make visible the music resonating and singing in the tapestry of rhythms. When I say that I wanted my playing to align with what feels natural, I mean that I wanted to develop the ability to play unself-consciously, as if no one's looking, no one's listening. I wanted to remove my self-conscious mind from the musical equation and instead just assist in the music's unfolding over time. When I play in accordance with the parameters of physical reality, coupled with my understanding of and feeling for music, my playing begins to feel effortless and fluent. Simultaneously, though rebellion was not on my mind, in retrospect I see that by not documenting my practice, by not sharing it online or even talking about it with anyone, I was escaping it being seen or heard. It did not exist in the panopticon of the digital universe. It was invisible to the technologies of quantification. This has led me to believe that the only things of great value to each of us are those things that resist being quantified, that will remain forever hidden from processes of collection and measurement. Human experiences are not things to be traded on the stock market. They should be honored and respected for their own sake, especially those experiences that are intentionally autotelic, that are done for the intrinsic sake of doing them. A word on this. While attention can seemingly be quantified by measuring our individual time spent on a website or even by tracking the movements of our pupils, the singular quality of subjective attention will never be reached or grasped or harvested for sale in the marketplace. What I'm going to be talking about here, autotelism, is by default resistance to the co-opting and trading of our consciousness for profit. As the philosopher Anton Barbacay says, digital technology is a functional medium of consciousness itself. It does not merely help us transact social relations, it refigures them, and in turn becomes our way for measuring and understanding social value. We should stop to think about how we learn to assess the value of things and how we come to determine our own self-worth. These things are now determined by digital technologies. There is a word that means doing something simply for its own sake. That word is autotelic, which was the title of my book, Autotelic, the Anti-Self-Help Book. Autotelic practices manifest their meaning through the act of doing them completely with total concentration and with no concern with what result, if any, they might yield. There's no ulterior motive, no money or ego boost, just losing oneself in the doing. Now, if I were a chef or a triathlete or a computer programmer or electrical engineer, and I found happiness and moments of timelessness in any of those, I would speak from that specific perspective. But because I've spent most of my life wanting to be a good drummer, I discuss long-term dedicated practice here in relation to the particular challenges of that medium. Drumming is a kind of extreme example of long-term focus. It falls into the category of avocations, and sometimes for a lucky few, actual vocations, such as painting, writing, dancing, and so on. Of course, these are all arts of some sort, but I don't expect my listeners to be artists or aspire to be artists. I do assume, though, a level of appreciation for some forms of art and art making. Still, what I explore here can and should be applied to any activity that involves opportunities for concentration and absorption. This could be anything from archery to yoga to weightlifting, cycling, cooking. As we will see, the type of concentration I want to examine contrasts with the scattered and random states of mind instigated by the medium of the mobile phone. Phone mind is often distracted and incoherent mind, regardless of the content. Notifications constantly buzz and ping, updates are required, passwords must be reset, notices pop up endlessly, spam. In contrast, autotelic mind is absorbed mind, absorbed to the point of losing self-consciousness and even losing the sense of having a self. An autotelic activity, like drumming, means something significant to the person who does it for the sake of doing it. It need not mean anything to anyone else, ever. And this is why it's important to realize that autotelic activities exist outside the world of exchange. They have no exchange value because, as the philosopher Jean Baudrillard pointed out, our universe of lived human experience and the universe itself cannot be exchanged for anything. There is no equivalent for the universe. To assign the phenomenon of human life a value of any kind is to miss the point that all life, and indeed the universe, cannot be exchanged for anything else, including any representation of it in any medium. There is nothing of equivalent value to the universe. It can't be traded for another one. You can't ask, hey, how much do you want for that universe? What will that put me back? This question points to the absurdity of the system and mentality of exchange. Nothing can stand in for the real event, for being there. That's what we have. Though we live in an imaginary world of exchange, the world itself is an autotelic phenomenon. The world exists for the sake of existing. There is no hidden secret meaning of the universe or of a life. There is no ultimate goal or reward. The reward is in this moment right now. The system of exchange is a human-made, historically determined, and temporary reality. When human values change or when humans disappear, the system of exchange will disappear with them. The idea of being able to exchange one thing for another is circular, self-referential, and therefore ultimately not grounded in anything other than a psychological fantasy. An active imagination transforms human labor into dollars and cents. There's nothing natural or inevitable about this. It was not always so, nor will it be this way forever. The system of exchange grounds itself using its own concepts, creating an imaginary world on top of the real one. It obscures the reality of life with a mesmerizing illusion. So the two types of consciousness I've outlined, autotelic consciousness, or what I've referred to as absorbed awareness, and the consciousness of exchange and ego inflation, are also two models of what constitutes reality. To appreciate our life, our understanding must be flexible enough to imagine various models of what reality might be understood to be. The writer Wilson Harris referred to this as the always unfinished genesis of the imagination. This is the end of part 1 of Absorbers and Distractors, the first section of Autotelic, a podcast about attention. I'm Dr. Louis Simon. Thanks for listening.